Hello everyone and welcome to Bevins Builds, and today I'm going to be discussing how to change the rear brakes on a Chrysler 300. And the reason that I'm doing this is because I see so many videos where the people are not telling people how to properly release the pressure of the emergency brake. So if this is something that interests you, stick around because it's coming up. First thing I want to mention is that you want to loosen your lug nuts before you jack the car up, which I did, removed, and now we're going to be looking at the brakes. Now real quickly onto the brakes. I want to, like I said, trying to do things as quick as possible. When you go to remove your rear pads, okay, first of all, you're going to have to remove this. There's two ways that you can release the pressure on your rear caliper. One, and mind you, I already have everything loosened and taken apart, so that's why it looks so easy, but one is you would take your screwdriver, a flathead, put it in between the caliper on the back side of the rotor, put it between the caliper and the back side of the rotor, and give it a little push. That'll help decompress your pressure. But what I typically do is you're going to have two bolts. You got one here and one down on the bottom. They are 15 millimeter. Now, when you go to loosen those, you're going to notice, and I just wanted to show you, that you have a nut on this side, which is on the piece that allows the caliper to ride back and forth. So if this is spinning and this is spinning as well, you're going to use an 18 millimeter wrench on those little nuts on the inside in order to remove your caliper. Now once you remove the caliper, you're going to take that, and what I like to do is just set it on the rear control arm, or you can also take it and lay it up on top of the rear control arm like so. Once you have that removed, the next thing you have to do is you have two, one here and one here, 18 millimeter bolts, and you just loosen those. I generally like to use a breaker bar to get them started, and then I use a socket to remove them. When I say breaker bar, this is the tool I'm referring to. A breaker bar does not have a ratcheting mechanism on the end of this particular handle. So this is a breaker bar. Like I said, I put an 18 millimeter socket on the end of this and break the bolts loose. And this is why this point of the assembly and disassembly is my pet peeve. When everybody's telling you to beat it with a hammer, they're not telling you what you should be doing. You should be using either a rubber mallet or, like this, I'm using a nylon mallet, because you don't want to damage anything. And yes, these do get stuck on that little ring in there, and let me show you what I'm talking about. It does get stuck on this edge right here, and usually what I do when I'm changing brakes, after I get that piece off, I will take a little bit of emery cloth. When I say emery cloth, I'm talking about a little piece of heavy grit sandpaper, and I will sand that back down and I will lubricate it. But here is what I'm talking about, my pet peeve. Most people, for whatever reason, when it comes to rear brakes, you have to keep in mind that you have an emergency brake that is a disc brake on the inside of this rotor here. And that, a lot of times, is what you're trying to beat it away from. And the only way you're going to beat that away from that, first of all, you're going to piss yourself off and knock your knuckles, and you don't want to do that because you're wondering why it's kind of loose, but it won't come free. There's a real simple, easy, quick thing to do to allow it to freely slide off once you get it broke free from this little lip. And what it involves is this little guy right here. Now, what that is the emergency brake adjuster. And what you do is there's a little dust cap. I'm trying to get that in the camera here, right here. You pop this dust cap off, and where that dust cap physically is, I'm trying to get down here so you can see it. It's right here. I've got my finger on the inside of it. But you pop the little dust cap off, and then what you're going to do is you're going to take a flathead screwdriver like so, and I'm going to show you how you do it. What you're going to do is through that little slit, you're going to slide your flathead screwdriver in, and you're going to get on to that little knurled part on the end, and then you just pull like so. And I'm trying to get it to turn, and that's what allows you to adjust and release the pressure on your emergency brake. If you don't release that pressure on the emergency brake pads, you're going to have a hell of a time getting your rotor off. Now, once you actually get the rotor off, my recommendation is you pull this spring off, and a lot of times it wants to be difficult, but simply take your flathead screwdriver, push it up in there like that, then you can push this apart and you can remove the adjuster. What I like to do is I pull this apart, and then I use just a little bit of anti-seize like you see here. You stick it down inside the hole and then slide that down through there. And then you want to run the thread of this up and down so that way the anti-seize gets inside of that. Because the next time you go to do your brakes, you don't want this to be rotted up. You want to be able to spin it and make it adjustable, so it's very easy to get your rotors off. Now after you get this little guy lubricated up, you sit it back on the clips. I'm trying to, there we go, like so, and then you just take your spring, and I'm probably going to have to use a screwdriver, so I'll have to do it off-site, but you just take a screwdriver or something else I like to use. I'm sorry about the jumpiness of the camera, is you can take yourself some vice grips, needle nose, grab it, pull it up, and just pop it in the hole. Now you want to open your new rotor, and it doesn't matter what brand you use. I'm using Carquest, but you take some brake cleaner, shake it up a little bit, and you want to make sure all the oil is off of the rotor. And you do that to both sides, because once you actually have it on the car, you are not able to freely get to both sides of that rotor. The next important thing is you want to make sure you get some brake lubricant, and you want to put it around that edge so you don't ever have to worry about that seizing back together again. And then after you get that placed, we're going to slide our rotor into place. Now when I say lubricate, just to be clear, you just want to get a very small dab on your finger and just lightly coat it. Nothing extreme. You don't want that stuff everywhere because you don't want that getting up into your brake components because it will cause your brakes to slip. This is just preventative maintenance to keep this from rusting together. Now once your rotor's back in place, the next thing we got to do is we got to compress the caliper, and I like to use a C-clamp. But before we get carried away with that, I personally always come to the front of the vehicle and I remove the cap from the brake reservoir. The reason I do that is because we want to allow the pressure to flow back easily while we are compressing the caliper. Now this is how I like to compress my calipers when they are the pressure style. What I do is I take a piece of wood, as you can see there, and I put it along the inside so that way this metal is not pushing against that, as I do not want to damage that seal on the caliper. And then you also want to make sure you are on the flat spot on the back of the caliper with the other side of the C-clamp. And then it's just simply a matter of sitting and compressing the caliper until it is fully decompressed. As of, again, right now, you can see it is fully extended. And once you're done tightening up your C-clamp, this is how she should look, fully compressed. Now you're ready to reinstall the pads with the caliper. Now before reinstalling the caliper support arm, first thing you're going to want to do is I like to remove the pins, and I've already lubricated these, as you can see, and they come out very easily and then pop right back in like so. But the other thing you want to do is you want to take off your old hardware and install the new hardware onto your caliper support arm. And as far as lubrication goes, I just get one of these and use it on both sides. I buy one for each side. These are only like $2 at AutoZone. You get them right at the counter when you go to buy your brakes. This is the lubricant you want to use. Now that we've got all that changed and lubricated and got the new hardware installed, we're ready to put the arm back on using our two 18mm bolts. Now something else I almost forgot to mention, when you're putting these bolts back in, you always want to use a dab of Loctite on the threads before you screw them in. Now before sliding your pads into place, what I like to do is again take another little bit of this lubricant and I put it on each side, that is the connection point, and then I take and put one little squirt of disc brake quiet on the back, just like so, so that way it won't rattle around while you're driving. With the pads in place, as you can see here, we grab our rotor, we bring it back down. You want to push your little screws in, line them up, trying to do this one-handed. And then we put the bolt through, tighten it up. And to tighten it up, we're doing the same step in reverse. We're putting our 18mm on the nut, and then we are simply taking our ratchet, putting it on there, and snugging her together. One more quick check before you put the tire on. Make sure the caliper does freely rotate, or not rotate, but slide on those pins after everything's good and tight. Snug those lug nuts up once you get it back on the ground, and you should be done. Now this is the point in the video where you go take it for a drive and then go have a cold one for a job well done. So now anyway, as always, thank you for coming to Bevins Builds. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share below. Ignore the air compressor in the background, and we'll see you next time on Bevins Builds.